once it's over. So what I want to do real quick before I get McHazard on the line here, I want to just go over a couple things with you guys having to do with the history of TASing in this game. So first of all, a tool-assisted speed run, often just referred to as TAS or TAS or TAS, whatever you want to call it. It's basically a run that is done on emulator. And when you do runs on emulator, you actually have the ability to slow the game down and slow it down even to the point where you go frame by frame. And you can manipulate the play exactly as you want it, which in this game becomes very, very, very important because there's a lot of things in this game that are frame perfect. There's a lot of things that you can do to manipulate the RNG. And there's just... I mean, to try to play this game slowed down and do some of this stuff wouldn't even help. Whereas other games, you could still make like a decent task with just the slowdown effect. But for this game, you really got to go frame by frame and have a pretty in-depth knowledge. So that being said, the first tool-assisted speedrun of this game was done in 2004 in October, and it was by Phil and Janisto. It was in now keep in mind, the TASs are timed in real time. Okay, so when you see the real times and they're slower than my runs, it's because it's real time, not game time. My runs are timed in game time, so I have like 16 whatever, right? 16:36. But the TAS times are like 17 whatever. So don't get confused by that. I have a note about that as well when I actually get the stream setup switched around. So anyway, the TAS in 2004, which was by Phil and Janisto, was real time 17:52, and out of the fights that were notable in terms of like compared to speed running at the time, I would say that Piston Honda 2 was a really notable fight. Probably, no, I think Soda Pop was probably not. Bald Bull 2 was really, really notable. It was a 108.97. That was something that nobody could even approach in regular time because there was a speedrunning community for this game before the first TAS came out. So it's not like they just went from ground zero. They actually had a lot of help from the speedrunning community for Mike Tyson's Punch-Out. Let's see, what other times would have been really notable back then. Don Flamenco 2 in 1:48. That would have been pretty ridiculous back then. And probably Mr. Sandman in 220.82, which is hilarious now that, I mean, everybody that plays the game seriously has beaten that time. But that was the first TAS time, 220.82. I could get that in like a single segment run nowadays. Super Macho Man at 47.97. That's probably also a pretty big one. And then, of course, Mike Tyson at 158. Nobody had even come close to that. So, you know, minds were blown when this TAS was seen, and it certainly helped people out in coming up like with real-time strats. There was some of this stuff that was applicable. So they did find some cool new stuff, and they actually ended up doing the first few improvements to their own TAS. Phil and Janisto did. They improved Bald Bull 1 from 58.97 to 57.82. They improved Sandman down to 219.25, which was pretty significant because definitely nobody was getting that in real time. Hell no. And they also brought Super Macho Man down to 46.48. So after that, like not even a year later, less than a year later, this was in September of 2005. About 11 months later, A. Delicate comes along. He's the guy, you may know who he is. He runs the site tasvideos.org. So if you've seen a tool-assisted speedrun or if you've been on that site, he's the guy that runs that site. And he's one of the most well-known, renowned TASers in the world. He's done a ton of TASs, and this one was, believe it or not, his first. This was his first ever TAS, was Mike Tyson's Punch-Out. And the reason being is because he loved the game. He actually was one of the console runners at that time. So he actually started out running on console, and then he saw the Phil and Janisto TAS, and he was like, man, I think I can improve that. So the notable improvements that he had were he brought piston Honda 1 from 42.82. He brought that down to 40.25, which was pretty significant. A couple seconds in a good TAS is a big deal. And he also knocked Soda Popinski down to 47 seconds, saving. I'm sorry, no, I'm sorry. He improved this later on. I'll come back to that. He improved Don Flamenco down to 58.99 from a minute 48. He brought Sandman down a quarter of a second to 219 flat, which was pretty significant at the time. And he also brought Super Macho Man down from 46.48 to 45.25. So those were his big improvements over the Phil and Janisto versions. And he later on continued to improve this TAS all the way through 2010. So from 2005 to 2010, he's the only one that made improvements at all to this TAS. And he brought Soda Pop all the way down to 45.25. He brought Don Flamenco down to 58 flat. He is the one, along with Matt Turk, that got the 218 flat on Mr. Sandman. And that was it. So yeah, so basically his most recent submission was a minor one that with some very small improvements. That was in 2010 after I had gotten into the game, and I kind of got him back into TASing it because I had needed his help on a bunch of stuff, and he helped me out, and that kind of rekindled his love of the game, and he was like, let me see if I can find some improvements to my TAS. It's been a while. So yeah, so that's basically the history of the TAS. The 2010 version that I saw, I never really thought, oh yeah, there's probably a bunch of big improvements to this TAS, or there's, I thought if anything there'd be like maybe like a couple frames saved here or a couple frames saved there, and that would be it, and it was no big deal. And then this year, McHazard came along. He's the guy that is the author of the TAS that I'm about to show you guys, and he sent me a PM. He was a viewer in my stream. He sent me a PM on Twitch. I mean, not on Twitch. He sent me a PM on SDA saying something about Piston Honda 2, and it had an attachment that was some weird file that I did not recognize, and I thought it was like a virus. And I was like, what the fuck is this, dude? This guy is trying to like give me a virus over the internet. But then I actually realized it was a BizHawk movie. It was like BZK or some shit. I don't know, man. So I ended up watching it, and it was Piston Honda 2, and he had done a TAS of Piston Honda 2, and it was a massive improvement over A Delicat's TAS. And I literally had to watch it like 4 or 5 times in a row to make sure that it was real. Like, that's how much my mind was blown from this TAS. I had to watch it repeatedly. I was just like, hold on, wait a second. Like, did I just hallucinate? Hold on. So I watched it. Eventually, I was like, okay, this is real. And then of course, I contacted him back, and he kind of gave me a little bit more about the particulars of it and explained the mechanics of it and whatnot. And eventually, you guys saw me get on stream. I got a 46 on Piston Honda 2, which was much faster than the 50.25, which is the current TAS that A Delicat holds. 50.25, that's what he had. And it got smashed. So McHazard, I thought, was just going to maybe submit that and just update that fight, but he was like, let me see and look and find out if I can do anything more in this game. So he did. Took a little while, and you guys are about to see the magic that he has found. So I'm going to go ahead and get him in Skype if we can here.